A single dark drop of crimson blood rests on the cold concrete of an immaculate residential porch. The intruder moves with deliberate and chillingly practiced precision. They left no obvious fingerprints on the glass. They left no physical ransom note pinned to the door. For 3 agonizing days, the desperate family waits in absolute emotional torment. The silence from the kidnapper is deafening and cruel. The federal authorities monitor every single phone line and every digital email account, waiting for a demand. Then on February 4th, 2026, the terrible silence is finally broken. A digital message arrives. The family receives a communication demanding a massive sum of money in exchange for the continued life of the 84-year-old woman. The sheer emotional whiplash of this sudden moment is completely devastating. For 3 dark days, they have imagined the absolute worst possible outcome. Now there is a sudden and bright spark of hope. There is no hesitation in their rapid steps. The kidnapper has finally made contact. The kidnapper simply wants money. If this is purely a financial transaction, there is a real chance to negotiate. There is a chance to pay the demanded ransom and bring Nancy home safely. The federal cyber agents immediately spring into tactical action. They do not simply reply to the incoming message. They deploy highly advanced cyber tracking protocols to trace the signal. They trace the digital footprint of the communication through complex networks. They follow the invisible data signals across hidden servers and encrypted routers. They rapidly narrow down the physical location of the unknown sender. The tension inside the Federal Command Center is extremely palpable. They reach a gloved hand up and physically disable the glass camera lens. They are actively hunting the dangerous person who violently dragged an elderly woman into the night. The tactical assault teams prepare to move on the target location. But when the cyber agents finally unmask the digital sender, the entire case takes a sickening and infuriating turn. The person hiding behind the glowing computer screen is not the sophisticated tactical intruder seen on the dark doorbell camera. The digital address leads the federal authorities directly to a man named Derek Colella. The federal agents realize with absolute disgust that this specific man has absolutely no connection to the violent physical abduction in the Catalina foothills. Derek Colella is an alleged digital scammer. He is heavily accused of watching the agonizing family tragedy unfold on national television and actively deciding to exploit the extreme pain of a desperate family for his own personal financial gain. He allegedly crafted a completely fake ransom demand using public information. The digital video feed immediately cuts to black. He is a digital vulture feeding directly on the severe misery of a missing woman. The terrible realization that the hopeful message is a cruel digital hoax crushes the temporary hope of the exhausted family. The real physical predator is still completely silent. The real predator still has Nancy. If you are as deeply disgusted by these predatory digital scams as the federal agents were, make sure to leave a comment below so others can understand the true depravity of these modern crimes. The entire investigation must immediately pivot back to the limited physical evidence. The cruel digital distraction caused by the alleged imposter only wasted precious investigative time. On February 5th, 2026, the Department of Justice officially announces the arrest of Derek Colella for his alleged role in the imposter ransom demand. The federal prosecutors formally charge him with severe extortion and interstate wire fraud. The watching public is absolutely furious, but the lead federal investigators cannot afford to dwell on the emotional distraction. The ultimate target of this highly calculated and ruthlessly executed intrusion is not an international corporate spy or a hardened criminal with dangerous underworld enemies. The biological clock is still loudly ticking. Nancy has been completely without her vital heart medication for 4 incredibly long days. The medical survival window is rapidly closing. The forensic analysts at the federal laboratory refocus all their collective energy on the few pieces of digital and physical evidence recovered from the initial violent crime scene. They enhance the brief doorbell camera footage pixel by microscopic. The digital video is very dark, and the camera was blinded very quickly, but the brief enhanced frames reveal highly crucial details. The Federal Behavioral Analysis Unit carefully studies the fluid physical movement. The unknown suspect is identified as a human male standing approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall. He is wearing completely dark and non-reflective tactical clothing specifically designed to blend perfectly into the deep shadows. But the absolutely most distinct physical detail is securely strapped to his upper back. The victim is an 84-year-old woman who relies on a medical pacemaker to keep her. The enhanced footage reveals the suspect is wearing a 25-liter capacity backpack. The specific brand is identified as an Ozark Trail Hiker pack. This exact brand and this specific storage capacity highly suggest the dark intruder came completely prepared to carry specialized tactical tools or perhaps medical sedatives. The meticulous and cold preparation continues to point directly toward a highly organized and dangerous offender. The local police departments rapidly expand their physical search grid outward from the quiet Catalina Foothills residence. They physically comb through deep drainage ditches and thick desert brush along the most likely escape routes. Their exhaustive and brutal physical efforts finally yield a highly tangible piece of physical evidence. Exactly 2 miles away from the violent crime scene, investigators discover a discarded dark glove. The synthetic material perfectly matches the dark tactical gear seen briefly in the camera footage. This is a massive forensic breakthrough. A tactical glove worn during a violent physical struggle will almost certainly contain microscopic traces of biological cellular material. Heart beating and requires a daily regimen of vital cardiovascular medication just to survive. The unknown suspect touched the glass camera lens. The suspect engaged in a chaotic physical confrontation that left crimson blood on the porch. The dark interior of the synthetic glove is a complete goldmine for latent touch genetic material. The constant friction of the synthetic material against the sweating human skin naturally sheds invisible cellular data. The forensic evidence recovery team incredibly carefully packages the recovered glove in a breathable, sterile paper bag to prevent any moisture degradation. It is rushed directly to the secure federal crime laboratory. The forensic biologists use highly sterile cotton swabs to gently extract genetic material from the inner fabric lining. They utilize a complex process called polymerase chain reaction to rapidly amplify the microscopic traces of genetic material. This scientific process creates millions of perfect copies of the specific genetic markers needed for a comprehensive biological profile. The sterile laboratory environment is completely focused on this single crucial scientific task. She has no known violent adversaries in the world. Every trained technician absolutely understands the immense stakes of the complex analysis. An 84-year-old woman is completely missing, and her vital medication has completely run out. The amplified genetic profile is carefully reviewed by senior analysts to ensure there is absolutely no cross-contamination from the crime scene technicians. It is an incredibly clean and highly robust genetic signature. The federal investigators finally possessed the exact biological identity of the faceless dark intruder. They rapidly upload the complex sequence of genetic numbers and biological markers into the massive national combined DNA index system. This highly secure federal database contains the exact genetic records of millions of convicted violent offenders and thousands of unsolved crime scenes across the entire country. The powerful system algorithms begin instantly comparing the newly extracted profile against the massive digital archive. The lead detectives stand anxiously by the secure communication terminals waiting for the digital alert. They fully anticipate a long documented criminal history of violent burglaries or severe physical assaults. Yet someone planned this abduction with military-level discipline. They expect to finally see a clear photograph of the dangerous man who violently stalked the Catalina foothills. They are completely ready to deploy the heavily armed tactical teams the exact second the database returns a matching name. The digital screen inside the federal laboratory finally refreshes after an agonizing period of computational processing. The highly anticipated results emerge from the massive national database, but they do not deliver the decisive victory the exhausted agents desperately need. The genetic sequence extracted from the recovered synthetic fabric yields absolutely zero matching records. The heavily armed tactical units waiting for an immediate deployment order are forced to stand down. The unknown suspect is a complete biological ghost. He has no prior felony convictions that required a mandatory genetic sample, and he has never been previously incarcerated in the federal prison system. This devastating forensic setback dramatically alters the entire trajectory of the urgent manhunt. The investigators are no longer hunting a documented career criminal with a predictable behavioral pattern. To understand how a frail and deeply vulnerable elderly woman became the prime target of they are actively pursuing a highly disciplined phantom who has managed to exist entirely outside the established boundaries of the national justice system. As the grim reality of the negative laboratory results settles over the command center, a much more pressing and terrifying crisis demands their full attention. The critical biological window for survival has completely shattered. It has been many consecutive days since the captive last received any specialized medical care. Medical experts consulting with the federal authorities state with chilling clinical certainty that a human body heavily reliant on prescription chemical support cannot endure this level of prolonged physiological stress. The total absence of necessary pharmaceutical intervention inevitably causes the internal organs to slowly shut down. The investigators understand perfectly well that they are transitioning from a frantic rescue operation into something significantly more somber. The search grids are drastically expanded, and the tactical focus quietly shifts toward locating a secondary location in the vast and unforgiving desert landscape. The psychological burden of this specific realization weighs incredibly heavy on the dedicated officers who have worked continuously without sleep. The surrounding neighborhood is entirely silent under the heavy darkness of the early morning sky. Perfectly orchestrated home invasion, we must trace the forensic timeline back to its precise origin. They meticulously review the initial timeline, searching desperately for any minute detail they might have accidentally overlooked. They re-examine every single vehicle logged on nearby traffic cameras, and they scrutinize every anonymous tip submitted to the local authorities. But the leads consistently evaporate into thin air. The sophisticated perpetrator executed the extraction with such terrifying precision that no tangible trail remains to follow. The complete lack of physical evidence creates an overwhelming sense of systemic paralysis. The investigative momentum grinds to a devastating halt. The public continues to watch the unfolding tragedy through continuous news broadcasts, but the actual progress behind closed doors is completely stagnant. The seasoned detectives who have spent decades dismantling complex criminal organizations find themselves entirely outmaneuvered by a solitary individual who vanished into the dark. The agonizing absence of answers breeds a pervasive and suffocating tension. Every time a telephone rings inside the federal command post, the agents tense up, hoping it is the crucial breakthrough they desperately require. We must absolutely ignore the loud noise of internet theories and look only at what the physical crime scene dictates. But the calls only bring more useless speculation from uninformed observers. The frustrating reality is that the perpetrator maintains absolute control over the entire situation. He dictates the terms of engagement simply by refusing to engage at all. The authorities can only wait and react. This passive posture is incredibly difficult for highly proactive law enforcement professionals to accept. They are forced to endure the agonizing passage of time while fully aware that their primary objective is slipping further away with each passing hour. The harsh desert environment surrounding the metropolitan area provides countless perfect hiding places for a predator who planned his escape routes meticulously. The vast expanse of arid land mocks the exhaustive search efforts. What are your own theories regarding how a suspect manages to evade a massive coordinated federal dragnet without leaving a single trace behind? Drop your thoughts in the comments below so we can analyze the most plausible scenarios together. The sheer logistical complexity of maintaining a completely invisible profile while holding a highly sought-after captive is staggering. If you want deep forensic analysis without the cheap online rumors, make sure to subscribe to Seth Crime Stories. It requires immense resources and an ironclad discipline that most ordinary criminals simply do not possess. The detectives are forced to confront the chilling possibility that they are dealing with an exceptionally rare and incredibly dangerous psychological profile. This is not a crime of sudden passion or disorganized desperation. It is a highly methodical and chillingly patient operation. The entire law enforcement apparatus is staring into a terrifying void where traditional investigative techniques simply do not apply. They need the suspect to make a catastrophic mistake, but the suspect remains perfectly hidden in the shadows. The agonizing delay stretches the limits of human endurance for everyone involved. The community begins to feel the chilling effects of this prolonged uncertainty. Neighbors view each other with deep suspicion, and the once peaceful streets are now filled with a lingering sense of profound dread. The realization that such a capable predator is still roaming completely free paralyzes the entire region. Follow the physical evidence wherever it leads, and we document every confirmed fact without relying on wild speculation. The most terrifying aspect of this massive federal investigation is not the staggering lack of physical evidence, but rather the absolute and suffocating silence that follows the initial incident. In traditional abduction cases involving prominent or wealthy families, the primary motivation is almost universally financial. The perpetrators eventually reach out to demand a substantial cash payment in exchange for the safe return of the captive. This expected communication establishes a crucial dialogue and provides investigators with an opportunity to negotiate. But as days slowly bleed into agonizing weeks, the genuine perpetrator in this specific case refuses to make any contact whatsoever. The desperate family utilizes their extensive media connections to broadcast a direct and impassioned plea to the unknown captor. They officially announce a staggering reward of $1 million for the safe return of their loved one. This massive sum of money is deliberately designed to tempt the kidnapper into making a strategic mistake, or to incentivize an accomplice to break their silence and betray the primary orchestrator. Who would stalk an 84-year-old woman in the dead of night? $1 million is enough money to entirely change a person's life and facilitate an escape to a non-extradition country. Law enforcement agencies set up secure, dedicated communication lines, fully expecting the massive financial lure to finally draw the elusive predator out of the shadows. They wait with extreme anticipation for the inevitable proof of life request. A photograph or a brief audio recording that confirms the captive is still drawing breath is the standard currency in these high-stakes criminal negotiations. But the secure telephone lines remain completely silent. The designated email inboxes remain entirely empty. The massive cash reward sits completely untouched. This unprecedented refusal to claim $1 million shatters every established psychological profile the behavioral analysis unit has constructed. The terrifying implication of this profound silence slowly begins to dawn on the exhausted investigative team. If the highly organized intruder did not risk his ultimate freedom for a massive financial payout, then his underlying motivation must be rooted in something significantly darker and far more disturbing. What dark purpose could such a deeply disturbing crime possibly serve? The case violently shifts from a standard ransom scenario into a deeply chilling psychological puzzle. Why would a highly capable predator meticulously plan and execute a high-risk home invasion simply to capture a person without demanding anything in return? The complete absence of a financial motive suggests a deeply personal vendetta or a severely twisted psychological compulsion. The experts begin to consider horrifying alternative theories. Perhaps the abduction was an act of extreme symbolic violence aimed directly at the prominent family to cause maximum psychological devastation. Perhaps the perpetrator operates under a complex delusion where the act of taking total control over another human life is the ultimate reward itself. This specific realization sends a wave of profound dread through the command center. A financially motivated criminal is rational and can be effectively manipulated through careful negotiation. A predator driven by pure malice or complex psychological needs is utterly unpredictable and exponentially more dangerous. The terrifying truth is that the captive may have never been intended as a bargaining chip. The terrifying answers begin to unravel when we examine the final quiet hours before the security camera went completely dark. She may have been the ultimate target from the very beginning. This paradigm shift forces the detectives to completely reevaluate every single piece of information they have gathered. They must look beyond the immediate circle of financial opportunists and begin searching for an individual who harbors a deeply seated and highly focused hatred. The entire narrative of the crime transforms into a slow burn nightmare where the lack of demands is the most aggressive psychological weapon the killer could possibly deploy. The silence itself becomes a deafening confirmation of pure evil. If you are prepared to face the deeply unsettling conclusions that this investigation inevitably brings, please take a moment to brace yourself for what comes next. The absolute refusal to communicate demonstrates a level of chilling emotional detachment that terrifies even the most hardened criminal profilers. It proves that the predator views the captive not as a valuable human asset to be traded, but entirely as a disposable object utilized to fulfill an unknown and dark objective. The crisp evening of January 31st, 2026 begins without any indication of the horror that is about to unfold. This complete lack of human empathy is the defining hallmark of a truly dangerous psychopath. The investigators realize they are essentially playing a deadly game against an adversary who refuses to acknowledge the established rules. The $1 million reward remains a haunting monument to the unsolved mystery. It serves as a constant reminder that some individuals are entirely immune to the temptations of wealth and are driven entirely by an insatiable hunger for absolute control and silent terror. The prolonged silence fundamentally breaks the spirit of the ongoing investigation. It leaves a gaping void where logical answers should exist. The failure of the massive financial incentive proves that traditional law enforcement tactics are completely ineffective against this unique breed of darkness. The true horror lies in the completely unknown. The current status of this chilling case remains a deeply frustrating and agonizing stalemate. At exactly 10 minutes to 10 in the evening, a vehicle pulls up to a quiet and beautiful residence in the Catalina foothills. Despite the deployment of unprecedented federal resources and the intense national media scrutiny, the investigation has not yielded a definitive conclusion. The Federal Bureau of Investigation officially classifies the file as an active and highly prioritized ongoing investigation. They continue to issue desperate public appeals urging any citizen with even the slightest fragment of potential information to come forward immediately. Dedicated tip lines remain open and operational 24 hours a day, monitored constantly by specialized agents waiting for a single credible lead. However, the grim reality is that the trail has grown completely cold. The massive search grids spanning the harsh desert terrain have been exhaustively completed and formally closed without yielding a single significant physical discovery. There is absolutely no recovered body to provide forensic closure, and there is absolutely no officially named primary suspect to focus the public outrage upon. The physical crime scene at the beautiful residence was meticulously cleaned and fully restored months ago. The heavy wooden door was repaired, and the shattered security systems were replaced with even more advanced technology. But the invisible scars left upon the neighborhood are completely permanent. Tommaso Cioni carefully escorts his mother-in-law up the driveway to her front door. The wealthy residents who once felt entirely insulated by their manicured lawns and private security patrols now live in a constant state of elevated anxiety. The haunting image of the dark figure moving silently through the early morning shadows has permanently destroyed their sense of safety. The deeply traumatized family is trapped in an unending psychological purgatory. They are entirely unable to properly grieve because they lack definitive proof of a tragic end, yet they are unable to maintain genuine hope because of the overwhelming medical realities and the sinister silence. They are forced to exist in a painful limbo where every single day brings a fresh wave of agonizing uncertainty. The unsolved nature of this specific crime is a festering wound on the community. It serves as a stark and terrifying reminder that regardless of social status or advanced security measures, true predators can still strike with absolute impunity. The case remains wide open, but the answers remain completely out of reach. The local authorities still conduct routine patrols through the affluent neighborhood, but their presence offers very little comfort to the terrified residents. There are no signs of forced entry at the reinforced windows and no security alarms ringing out through the quiet suburban streets. The desert air is cool and incredibly still. They all know that the police were completely unable to stop the initial intrusion, and they know the perpetrator is still roaming completely free. The lingering question that torments the lead detectives every single night is incredibly simple, yet completely unanswerable. Where did the phantom vanish to after the violent extraction was completed? How does a person successfully transport an incapacitated captive across heavily monitored state lines or into the deep wilderness without triggering a single surveillance alert or leaving a single microscopic trace behind? This fundamental mystery continues to completely baffle the greatest forensic minds in the country. The investigation has utilized every single advanced technological tool available, from complex cellular tower dumps to advanced satellite imagery analysis, but the results are always exactly the same. Nothing. The entire case file is a monument to a perfectly executed crime. The haunting absence of a resolution ensures that the chilling narrative will never truly be closed. The sprawling neighborhood is widely known for its exceptional safety and its high exclusivity. The absolute perfection of the vanishing act is the most terrifying legacy of the unknown predator. It proves that true monsters do not always get caught, and sometimes the darkness simply swallows the truth completely whole. The federal authorities refuse to officially close the massive binder containing the compiled evidence. The agents assigned to the case routinely review the extensive documentation, hoping that a fresh perspective might suddenly illuminate a previously hidden connection. They conduct regular follow-up interviews with the initial responding officers, and they continuously monitor national databases for any similar behavioral patterns occurring in other jurisdictions. But the stark reality of the passing time severely diminishes the probability of a sudden miraculous breakthrough. The community slowly attempts to move forward, but the terrifying memory of the unsolved abduction remains a permanent shadow over the entire region forever. The detectives know that the truth is buried somewhere out there waiting to be discovered. The deeply disturbing presence of an imposter demanding money during a genuine tragedy provides a crucial lesson in modern digital forensics and criminal psychology. These specific individuals are known in law enforcement circles as cyber vultures. It is the exact kind of place where wealthy residents sleep soundly behind manicured green lawns and heavy wooden doors. They do not orchestrate the actual physical crimes. Instead, they utilize sophisticated automated software to continuously scrape public news networks and social media platforms for breaking reports of missing persons. Once they identify a highly vulnerable and desperate family, they rapidly deploy completely fabricated evidence to demand immediate payment. The federal cyber agents combat this specific threat by analyzing the deep digital metadata embedded within the communications. They track the routing protocols and examine the invisible digital signatures to definitively differentiate a genuine physical captor from a remote, opportunistic scammer. What this case teaches us about the modern landscape of high-profile criminal investigations is deeply profound and highly concerning. We currently exist in an unprecedented 24/7 information age where horrific personal tragedies are instantly broadcast globally. This immediate, widespread dissemination of sensitive information forces the justice system to fight a brutal war on two entirely separate fronts. The primary front is the arduous physical pursuit of the violent perpetrator who committed the actual atrocity. The secondary and equally demanding front is the desperate effort to shield the victimized family. The elderly woman stepping safely inside is Nancy Guthrie, from the massive swarm of digital predators who seek to exploit their extreme public agony. The justice system must now utilize as many resources battling remote opportunists as they do hunting violent offenders. This dual battle severely strains law enforcement capabilities and dramatically complicates the critical search for the truth. It is a grim reflection of a society where profound tragedy is routinely commodified by unseen malicious actors. The haunting reality of this specific investigation is that the perpetrator succeeded precisely because he left absolutely nothing behind for the federal authorities to analyze. He operated as a complete void, ensuring his malicious actions were entirely untraceable. But what happens when an extremely dangerous predator takes the exact opposite approach? What happens when a killer intentionally oversaturates a violent crime scene with highly specific physical evidence specifically designed to completely manipulate the psychological direction of the police investigation? Next time on Seth Crime Stories, we will officially open a terrifying case file where every single piece of physical evidence was a carefully constructed lie. She is an 84-year-old grandmother who lives a quiet and highly structured private life. We will explore a dark narrative where the forensic data itself was utilized as a weapon to protect a monster. Make sure to subscribe to the channel right now. Turn on all your notifications and never forget to verify your own security systems tonight. Stay incredibly vigilant out there, and always remember that the most dangerous predators are the ones who understand exactly how to use the truth against you. We dive deep into the forensic reality of true crime every single week, so keep following the actual evidence with us. She is also the biological mother of a highly prominent television broadcast host. Her daughter Savannah is a familiar and beloved face on national morning television programs. This direct connection to immense fame and wealth casts an invisible shadow over the quiet Arizona residents. But inside the dark house, the daily reality is much more fragile and delicate. Nancy is not living a life of glamorous invincibility, but according to former forensic experts speaking on national news networks, that solitary trail of blood tells a grim story of sudden physical violence. She is a senior citizen actively managing severe and threatening health conditions. Her physical survival depends entirely on a strict daily schedule of prescription medications and the continuous electrical operation of an implanted pacemaker. Without her specific pills, her cardiovascular system is a literal ticking clock. When her son-in-law says a polite goodbye and the heavy front door locks securely shut, Nancy is entirely alone in the large structure. She goes about her nightly routine entirely unaware that her safe home is no longer a protected sanctuary. The heavy doors and the digital security systems provide a terrible false sense of absolute safety. Outside in the deep darkness, someone is waiting patiently. The sheer behavioral anomaly of this specific situation is deeply unsettling to any criminal profiler. Criminals who typically target high net worth families usually seek quick cash or easily pawned valuable jewelry. They look for empty vacation houses or vulnerable floor safes. The splatter patterns reportedly suggest a desperate physical struggle where a victim was struck down. They do not typically plan the highly complex physical extraction of an elderly woman who requires constant medical supervision. The logistical burden of keeping an 84-year-old captive alive is immense and highly risky. Yet the unknown predator waiting outside the Catalina Foothills home is not deterred by this medical reality. They have watched the house closely. They have learned the daily schedule. They know exactly when the elderly woman will be isolated and defenseless. The psychological tension building in the quiet hours of the night is absolutely suffocating. Every single tick of the clock brings the masked intruder closer to the door. Nancy goes to sleep, assuming she will wake up to a normal sunny morning. But the peaceful world she knows is about to be violently shattered. The false security of the quiet neighborhood is a carefully laid trap without warning and left coughing up blood before being forcibly dragged away into the unforgiving night. The very isolation that provides her peace is the exact physical vulnerability the predator plans to exploit. As the night deepens, the silence of the house becomes an ominous warning. Someone is standing just beyond the threshold preparing to strike. The terrifying transition from peaceful slumber to absolute panic happens in the early dark hours of February 1st, 2026. The sun has not yet risen over the desert when the digital security system registers a brief moment of external activity. The doorbell camera captures the rapid approach of the dark figure. The short footage is entirely silent, but the malicious intent is deafening. The intruder moves directly toward the wide-angle lens. A gloved hand covers the camera, and the digital eyes of the secure house are permanently blinded. What happens next is a physical nightmare reconstructed only by the violent remnants left behind on the concrete. Directly above the blood-stained porch, a smart security camera stares blankly at the empty driveway. The secure house is abruptly breached. The absolute silence is permanently broken. A violent physical confrontation occurs right at the threshold of the family home. The frail 84-year-old woman is suddenly confronted by a faceless and aggressive attacker. The physical violence is swift and brutal. The dark drop of blood found later on the concrete porch reportedly indicates that Nancy did not simply surrender to the intruder. There was a chaotic struggle. She was injured in the chaos. The sheer terror of that specific moment is almost impossible to fully comprehend. An elderly woman fighting desperately for her own life against a prepared intruder in the total dark. By the time the local police are officially notified and patrol cars race into the Catalina foothills, the sun is finally beginning to rise. The uniformed officers arrive with loud sirens blaring and bright lights flashing across the manicured lawns. They approach the breached house with their service weapons drawn and ready. They find the front wooden door compromised. Just moments before the violent struggle, that camera recorded a deeply chilling visual sequence. They clear the interior rooms one by one in a tactical formation. The house is completely empty. There is absolutely no sign of the dark intruder and absolutely no sign of Nancy Guthrie. The lead detectives immediately recognize the extreme medical urgency of the terrible situation. This is not a standard missing person case. They find her critical heart medications left sitting completely behind on the kitchen counter. The ticking biological clock begins counting down immediately. Without those specific pills, her fragile body will begin to rapidly fail. The forensic evidence teams arrive and quickly tape off the entire property. They photograph the blood droplets. They dust the door frames for latent prints. They pull the disabled camera footage for digital enhancement. A solitary figure draped entirely in dark tactical clothing slowly approaches the front wooden door. The local television stations begin broadcasting live reports directly from the suburban street. The national media quickly picks up the breaking story. The shocking news that the mother of a famous television anchor has been violently abducted sends massive shockwaves across the entire country. The entire nation is watching the empty house in Arizona. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is immediately called in to take over the complex kidnapping investigation. Federal agents canvass the surrounding neighborhood looking for witnesses. Search helicopters violently scan the open desert terrain using thermal imaging cameras. The massive federal response is incredibly swift and highly aggressive. But despite the massive resources and the incredible manpower, the physical trail is completely cold. The masked attacker moved like a total ghost.